Hello, welcome to episode 152 of this series where I'm programming an NES game live on Twitch from scratch. Let's do this. So, getting a little bit of a later start than usual here. And mostly that's just because I had some stuff to do beforehand, but let's go back to what we were talking about last time. So last time we were talking about how we needed to be able to represent levels in a way where we talked about we have the ability to designate that there's a scrolling area and then a map area, and we talked about how the scrolling area still would use a full-on map in terms of where the enemies are placed, so that we could have a visual representation of that, since it really plays in pretty well to the way the scrolling works. There's really no reason why we can't reuse that capability there. The only difference is that there's no actual background for meta tiles, because in repeat scroll mode we're just using one meta tile over and over and over again. So as part of that, let's create our new map. And it is an orthogonal map. We are not using any compression. It's CSV. It is left down order. The width is 32 tiles. The height, let's see, how long should we make the first repeat scroll section? I mean, if we're going to do, we can work it out by number of screens, right? So there's nothing really, what is the maximum that we can do for our camera? Let's look at it this way. It's the camera is 16 bits, the world camera. So that's 65,535. And the maximum height of the screen is what? It's 256 by 240. So that's 273 screens. That's a lot. Because let's see, 273 screens is let's see, 240 5 by 8 is 30. 278. 278 by. Did I do that right? Times 278. 8,340 tiles, which is divided by 2. That's approximately 4,000, a little over 4,000 meta tiles high. That's a lot. So anyway, that's obviously more than we probably want to do. And if we're scrolling at a 1-to-1 speed, that means it takes 240 frames to traverse one screen, and 240 frames is 4 seconds. So we have a couple of options. We can obviously slow things down after the first repeat scroll, or first few screens of repeat scrolling, to make it so we don't have to have as long a screen here. But I do want it to go relatively quickly. Again, the idea here is that you are in a section where the ship is just coming out. It's low over the water, and so it should be moving fairly fast and allow you to kind of have that sense of being over the water. I think I talked about at some point that it would be cool to have some sort of like water splash effect at the rear of the ship to make it really sink in that you're over the water and make it feel a little bit cooler, a little bit more realistic. So, but we'll see. Not important for today. Actually, the other thing I want to talk about is, I was kind of getting stressed out about thinking about what the background was going to look like and what the actual map layout was going to look like. And we had looked at a few different games. MDTA UK had suggested looking at the, I forget what the website is called now, but the site that has documented all the NES maps that they take screen captures of, and then you can use them. You can see the whole thing. And while it was cool to see, what is that called? While it was cool to see that, VG Maps. While it was cool to see that, it was also kind of, like, it didn't really help us in the sense of giving me an idea of, like, what the right way to build a map like this is, right? Because it's it was neat to see that this one map is actually part of multiple maps. Or part of a whole world map, and then it's just like broken into sections. But that doesn't really, on the one hand it's cool, on the other hand it's like, that doesn't really matter per se. Like, I was really focused on it and then realized that, you know what, probably really doesn't even matter. Like, I can look at this and just make this all blank to start off with, just for the sake of building out where the enemies are placed and stuff like that. So I think that's what we're going to do. Oh, and one other thing that we'll probably do, I'll try that here because it's a pretty neat feature that we were looking at in one of the, we've done a few of them, not so many recently, but I guess maybe about a year ago. I don't remember when the first one was. On Video Game Sage, they did a like a virtual meetup, a virtual homebrew show and tell, where we were kind of talking about stuff we were doing. And Nathan Tolbert showed that there is a really neat feature in the Untitled that lets you take multiple maps and stitch them together to create like a whole larger world, which we're gonna do here, just to kind of show this. But so for now, let's talk about how many screens we think we need for this first section. So talking about that, going, a full screen travels, or a full screen passes in about 4 seconds. I don't know, like, is a minute too long for that repeat scroll? Like, is it too long to just have a minute of water in the background when you get started? I feel like that's okay because you're going to be focused on enemies and power-ups and stuff like that to start off with. So if that's the case, that's, 15 screens? And 15 screens, it's 240 by 8. That's I don't know why 30, right? I can do basic math, I promise. So what did I say? It's 60 seconds divided by 4. It's 15 screens. So times 30, that's 450. That's not the key sequence I wanted. 450. So let's create a 450 tile high map with 8 by 8. And let's save this, and I believe I said it was going to be called Ocean 1. The other thing that I think I mentioned this when he brought this up also, was that you can just save it as a JSON file. You don't have to save it as that intermediate TMX format, which is really nice. Alright, so We need to add a palette and objects layer. Okay, and then we will turn that off visually. Now, I just want to look at this for a second. Oh, right. So this was how we were controlling the palette use in the background. I have to look back at like how that exactly works because I don't remember off the top of my head. Probably should make this use the same palette now. I think it's just where it's literally just palette 0, palette 1, palette 2, palette 3, if I'm remembering even remotely correctly. And then we don't have these other tiles, so we can just switch, force all of those to be the same. And okay, so that's that. We'll turn that palette layer off. Hey, Lunatrek. Cool, thanks. I'm glad you like them. It's yeah, I'm glad you're getting some use out of them. What kind of project are you working on? If you're open to saying, you don't have to, but figured I'd ask. Alright, so sorry, my glasses are pretty dirty. Alright. So the one thing I'm wondering about is how come I can see... Oh, there it is. Okay, because it was just too far away for the grid to show up. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab... these water tiles. And then, let's see, am I able to just place them that way? I can do it there, but I can't here. That's a bummer. Can I do that? Why can't I place on 2? Because I'm placing on the wrong thing. Okay. That makes sense. So we're just going to fill with blue, just so we have something. We have a million questions. Working on Lunatrek game. Spaceship with a rotating shooter on it. Okay, cool. Well, happy to answer questions here, or if you want to message me another time, privately, certainly feel free to do that. I mean, I don't think he'll mind me saying, but somebody on Discord, was messaging me and needed some help understanding something related to how memory mapping works and how labels work versus RAM. And we spent, I don't know, probably at least a good hour chatting. So, I don't know how complex your questions are, but, happy to help in any way I can. So, all right, so we've got our ocean here. So what I want to do now is I want to change this to use some stuff that's a little bit more not ocean, let's say, just for the sake of making it clear we've moved on to the next map. So we can grab, oops, let's go to this. Grab that. Grab that. Grab that one. Just kind of grab, I don't want to say randomly, but not without too much specific purpose here. Just going to try and build out something that, you know, looks visually different from the other map, and then we'll try out this mode here if I can figure out how to make it work. And is there is, though it's a little repetitive there, but that's okay. That looks pretty decent. In the meantime, I understand how sprites and the backgrounds work with bin files and hardware limitations, trying to work on music using a tracker. Cool. Yeah, the trackers are neat. I definitely feel like they're fun to play with, although they can be a little bit, I mean, like everything else, they're limited in terms of what the capabilities are, but it's still, there's still a lot that you can do. I mean, if you think about the music that's out there that people have made for the NES and how good it is, it's, you know, just kind of makes me want to like do my best to have good music in the game. So do we not have, looks like we don't have a tile for that. So we'll just kind of kludge this in here. That's not too bad. All right, we can save that. Let's see, how do I do the big overworld map thing? You just copy the text from the tracker music into the ASM file. Not that. So no, I think what you do is, I think there are a couple of things you can do. I know that the trackers can export assembly, some of them to use in the. They can export assembly to use in the NES, but they are, I'm pretty sure from what I remember, it's like not optimized, so it's considered that you just kind of do it to kind of hear what it really sounds like, and then most people I know tend to use tools to convert the output from Family Tracker to something that works for their game. Like Derek Andrews from Gradual Games, he wrote a sound engine that got used and slightly modified for what's it called, NES Maker, called GG Sound, and he had Python scripts that he used to convert, I'm pretty sure, from Family Tracker to GG Sound. So, and I'm pretty sure that that's the. Sorry, I'm talking and like looking at this and trying to find what I'm looking for at the same time. And I'm pretty sure that's the standard process that people use. But having not made my own audio yet, other than just kind of playing around with it, I can't give you anything more. Well, I mean, yes and no. I don't, like, that's the simplest approach to getting music to work, right? Is you generate code that drives the audio functionality in the CPU, right? And I believe that's all that FamiTracker exports. But the problem with that is that like that's large. It's not really optimized, and potentially is also slow to run. I'm thinking about that. Like I don't know how it would support support stuff like pausing your game or running your game logic properly, because it's literally just an output to run the sound. So yeah, so like that would be a problem. And then if you converted just the data, then you could kind of your sound code could read the data in and make it do what it needed to on the audio side, while also understanding how to deal with your game logic, in between loading in sounds and processing sounds. It's sort of complex. Like writing a sound engine is kind of tough. It's one of the things that I've kind of gone back and forth in my mind. Like, do I want to do that? Because there are a couple of audio game engines. There's Pentley and Famitone and GG Sound, and they're all considered pretty good. I think Famitone is maybe the most optimized, from what I remember. It's been a while since I've looked at it, so if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But GG Sound is kind of like in the middle. It's kind of meant for being simple, but works well. Supports most of what FamiTracker supports. There are a few things that it doesn't support. From what I remember, Derek was saying that he didn't support it because he didn't see the need for it, and didn't necessarily like it either. The specific features, and then Pentley, I think it's kind of similar to Famitone. Just give me a second here. I want to see how this actually works. Working with worlds. Sometimes game large worlds switch over the map to find a world. Okay, I did that. Click add the current map to the loaded world. Okay, so I don't need remove folder from project. Map. Where is that button? Where is... Click the add the current map on the toolbar. Okay, I will if I can find it. Oh, wait, it's this thing? World tool. Add, okay. Did that, and then did that. Oh, oh, ooh. So how do I, okay, that's cool. So how do I, can I just, oh yeah, that is sweet. So, yeah, cool. So now that's fully, almost properly aligned. Now the thing is, I don't know that we'll do anything with the world capability per se. Like, I don't know that I'm going to implement support for it in the export tool. But it is cool to be able to do this and, like, be like, okay, here's the map, right? Like, here's the whole thing. And even though it's two totally separate things, and then you can actually see it relative to the rest of the game. That is cool. I like that. Yeah, so that's the thing with the music, and it's a little bit complex because it's got to weave in to the gameplay logic, and generally, I mean, not generally, but as you're working on stuff, you want it to obviously be efficient so that you don't slow down the game by adding the music, and vice versa. You don't want the gameplay to slow down the music like it did in some old NES games, but or maybe you do. Maybe you think that's like cool because that's like part of part of the aesthetic of an NES game, right? Like there are people who are working on games and they're doing it in a PlayStation 1 style. And so they're deliberately recreating that aesthetic of the dithering on the textures in their 3D polygons for whatever reason. It's interesting to hear that people are doing that, but you know, that's like, I can get, I get it. Like if that was your first console, and you have good memories of playing those games, you know, then that's like your version of seeing 8-bit graphics, you know, for people who are into the NES. Yeah, that's the plan, is that I want to compose the soundtrack. So, you know, obviously part of that is that it's time consuming to do so, but at the same point, that would be kind of ideal for me, just in terms of like wanting to keep it a relatively small project in terms of number of people working on it. Like I'm absolutely terrible at art, so I thought about the idea of me doing art for about 15 seconds and then was like, nope, I need to get somebody's help. And I reached out to somebody and she was like, well, I'm not really into that genre of game, but my boyfriend is really good at this and he would be able to help you, and that is Jordan. He's put together some good stuff. He's obviously been very patient with this project. He understands, I think, or hopefully, you know, why it's been going slow. But yeah, very nice guy and put together some good stuff. So yes, I plan on doing the music myself. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. All right, so let's start off with thinking that for the beginning of the level, you know, like with most shooter games, you want just some like I don't know, I think of them as like popcorn enemies. Like they're just simple one-hit enemies that are really not consequential and you know, are just super easy to destroy and kind of get you used to maneuvering the ship and how the weapons work and stuff like that, you know. And then obviously it's going to ramp up a little bit after that, but let's go look at what we actually have here, because we have a number of different things that Jordan had put together, and I think we can just leverage what we have here to start off with. Oh my goodness, that is absolutely minuscule. Part of the thing with the soundtrack is I'm undecided if I want to just start with doing it in FamiTracker to begin with, or if I want to, these were images I made, or if I wanted to write stuff just kind of free form and then figure out how to demake it to sort of 8-bit style. All right, so let's use this. We've used this guy before. Do we still have this loaded into the project? I believe we do. We do. Okay. So let's go back to the map, and here's our beginning. So the first 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 30. Should there be 15? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So like the first screen is up to is this area here. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, right, you're dealing with such a small area and such low resolution. It's really tough to draw something that looks good or expressive or any of those things. That's why I look back at any of the art from that era that's really good and just kind of marveled at what these artists were able to do. I mean, and then you look at someone like Franken Graphics and her ability to create art for the NES, and it's just crazy. Like, she's just so good at what she does. So it's pretty amazing. All right, so what I want to do, I think, is probably just want to create like a wave of enemies that are going to... we really haven't... Like, I really haven't done anything with the behaviors of these enemies. I think probably what I want to do is have them kind of come in and then fly back. And so what I would do then is have kind of a... Oops. A wave of them like this. And then after a few moments, the same thing, but going the other way. I know, very creative, but like, I mean, part of these shooter games is that there are patterns, and you know, while you're playing, you have to recognize the pattern and anticipate what's going to happen. Pixel art is the weakest part of my ROM hack. I can't select more than 4 colors on the palette. Yeah, I mean, so that's a whole. You know, you can obviously do things to make the art look better in terms of working with multiple sprites using multiple palettes and whatnot, but like that adds complication to the code and to the tools, and so, you know, that's where you kind of have to choose if you want to you have to choose like what's more important to you at the time that you're working on it. This is the wrong spot. If you've seen Metal Machine's new Z1 ROM hack, the pixel art makes it shine. I don't know that one. What is that? Metal Machine Z1 ROM hack. Let's take a look real quick. Well, for the attributes are really are always a headache, but more so for the backgrounds than anything. The sprites, it's not too bad. What am I looking for here, Miralupa? Is it going to be in the description? No. What about the author? Legend of Zelda Reloaded Randomizer. Does it have any gameplay screenshots? No. Just as a screenshot for the utility. Be cool to see. Oh wait, here we go. Maybe they have. No screenshots. How do I know if I want this or not if I can't see what it looks like? Hellwalker? Is that different than what I'm looking at here? The randomizer is a prior project. Okay. Let's see. Hellwalker. Hellwalker. Let's see. Oh, thank you. Whoa. Wow. What a difference. That's cool. Reminds your prior project. I think I remember seeing Biscuit participating in a discussion on the NES dev forums about color palette transitions. With Castlevania 2, there are only a few screenshots of the enemies, but they have all been redone. Yeah, that's pretty intense. Alright, so... Oh, you know what I should have done? Yeah, it was because I was talking and didn't really think about this. Let's get rid of these because these actually have to be something. So they are... Oh, well, so that's an interesting... That is an interesting thing, which is that they do not have a type. So how... I was so focused on spawn types. What does it do? How do we handle... being able to respond to new patterns based on... Yeah, so sort of like... That's the good thing about like good game design, that iterative... it's almost like a call and response, right? Where the game teaches you... Like, that's one thing where I think people don't like older games, especially older NES games, where... it's just purely memorization, you know, where you just have to know, like, there's this enemy that's going to pop out and kill you. And if you don't know that, you're going to die, and then you're going to have to remember every time you play, versus other games where it's like, okay, we're going to teach you that when you see this, you have to do that, right? And then it's going to be really deliberate at first, and then later on... there are going to be less deliberate, more subtle versions of that tease you into realizing that you have to respond in the same way. Like, so a really, really good example of that, totally not action-based, but definitely that concept is the way The Witness works. If you've never played The Witness, I mean, it's an old game by now. It's been out for a while, but if you've never played The Witness, it is ostensibly sort of like a puzzle game, but, you know, it does exactly that. It teaches you how to solve the puzzles with very simple puzzles, and then moderate puzzles, and then harder puzzles. And then as you go, it combines the concepts you've learned from other puzzles. And so there are areas that you go to, they're not blocked off by anything other than puzzles that you have to solve, like literal puzzles on these almost like LCD panel things. And, you know, if you knew how to solve the puzzle because you had played the game before, you can easily go into those areas. But when you first play the game, obviously your inability to solve the puzzle from not having learned how they work is what that's the gatekeeping there. So like if you've played the game before, you can sort of, it's not sequence break, because I don't know that there is necessarily a sequence per se, but you can definitely go into areas that have more advanced puzzles because you know how the puzzles are solved. There's nothing that's artificially stopping you from going in there. And the whole game is like that. The whole game is just building upon concept after concept. Slowly introducing enemy with patterns and then throw them together in new formations, preferably new each time you play. Well, so new each time you play is interesting because then it becomes, a question of, is random what you want? Like, so I know people like the roguelikes because of the randomness that they introduce. But like the randomness is only to a point, right? Like the randomness, there are only certain parts of the game that are actually random. Not everything is random, because otherwise you'd never learn the game, you'd never really progress, and it would just be frustrating and kind of a time wasting game. So, it's like what are the parts that you want to change each time to make it interesting to the people playing? And that's it's a hard balance to strike. And some games get it done really well, and others don't. I picked up Hades. I've heard that's really, really good. Supposedly, Deathloop is really good too, and I think they both have sort of roguelike elements in them. Haven't played them though. I don't have Deathloop. I have, but I do have Hades. All right, so when we're looking at the objects, we do look to see if it is a spawn point or a camera counter or a palette swap to do something different. And otherwise, how do we know what the thing is? Do we just look it up by name? Replayability trumps comfortability. I mean, I think in certain genres, yeah. I mean, in a shooter, for sure, replayability, like, because most shooters aren't that long, right? Like, they generally take, 4-5 hours to beat the first time or so, and then it's about high score and maybe learning things about the game that you didn't know. So, I mean, I can see that, but at the same time, there's a difference between making a game replayable because it's random and potentially frustrating as a result versus, it's there's a lot to unfold and it has like a complex layered structure to it. Work with YYCHR and NES Screen Tool, or can one do the job? You definitely need both. Screen Tool is, like its name implies, for the screen. So it's for like building backgrounds and working with the attributes and exporting that stuff out to be used directly on the NES. I just find that Screen Tool has a lot of things that I don't like about the way it works, and so that's why I use tiled. thought of an AI background once. Always different platforms. Tough. If you played any roguelikes where the randomness has made it unenjoyable. No, I can't think of any off the top of my head, just because I really haven't played that many. Like, I played Dead Cells for a decent amount of time, and I liked that. That's the one I've probably spent the most time on. I played Enter the Gungeon also a little bit, and The Binding of Isaac a little bit too. But those are all considered really good games. So it's not it's really not a fair thing to even use those as examples, right? Because like they're good games. But I can imagine that there are probably hundreds of little indie roguelike projects that are out there, that nobody's ever heard of, that are probably really poorly constructed, and the randomness is like not good. I mean, even if you take something like a randomizer, right, for a game like Legend of Zelda or A Link to the Past or something like that. Like, I've watched playthroughs with A Link to the Past randomizer. There's a really, really careful balance that has to be struck by the randomizer to ensure that, yes, it's random, but it's also like not completely ridiculous. The random elements of Gungeon are the finest part. The stuff that is consistent between runs feels the weakest to me. Example, lack of diversity in bosses. Yeah, I could see that. I can see what you're saying about Gungeon. I mean, but again, like that's a good example of a roguelike, right? Like, part of the problem is I haven't gone out and just spent a lot of time finding every roguelike that's out there and trying to play them and see, what I don't like, which ones I don't like. And that's just on me not having enough time to do that. So I'm not going to say that randomness is bad. I think there's definitely a place for it, especially in terms of repeatability. So, replayability. But it's just got to be done the right way, or it can be bad, or I could at least imagine that it could be bad. So, all right, what am I doing here? If the type property is not null, then what is it doing? It is just using what to determine the thing. So just going to look it up by name. I think that's all it does. But it's been so long since we've worked with anything like that, I can't even tell you off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, like, there are definitely, so like one example of randomness that can be frustrating is I knew what you meant. I think I actually read it as struck and not struct, so that's fine. Like one example of randomness that's not good is like random item drops can be really bad. Like even in games that are good, you can get really frustrated with item drops that are randomized but not properly randomized, and so you find yourself kind of frustrated with how much work you need to do to get the things you're looking for. And on the flip side, it can be also just as bad when you are working in a situation where you're playing something and the random drops are like good all the time, and then it totally removes any element of challenge. right? So like I felt like the item drops in Breath of the Wild were sometimes too generous. But, you know, the random item drops in, I don't know, pick a Mega Man game. Mega Man 1, let's say, because that game is pretty unpolished compared to later entries in the series. You know, that can be frustrating when, like, all you need is some health and you just keep getting random nonsense drops of, like, the weapon refill capsules, you know? And you could argue that that's done on purpose to make it the game challenging, but because of the differences because of the other problems with the game, and also it was a pretty early game in that genre, I think it's more likely that that's just like bad design, right? They just didn't know necessarily what they were doing, so they did it and it kind of worked, and so they just kind of left it the way it was. Oh, for sure, Breath of the Wild is a way more mass appeal type game. So there is no there. It's definitely a bad comparison in that sense. Or not a bad comparison. It's not a one-to-one comparison. Let me do this here because I honestly have no... I guess I could walk through the code, but that's not as fun as just trying it and seeing if it breaks. So let's do that. Unknown type passed to get entity ID from string. Alright, well... let's see what we've got here. I wonder if I just need to define something like a straight up entity definition, or maybe it actually... get entity ID from string. There is no type. So that was kind of a weird... I guess I wasn't really thinking about that carefully. But the project entities list has all of these things in it. So I guess what I want to do is... oh, I remember now. Okay. Have you considered 16 tile wide stripes instead of tiles? You could have 256 stripes per bank and switch banks to change level fields. 16 tile wide stripes. So, so you're saying, like, in the map, instead of using these meta tiles, just have, like, just literally a stripe across. And just kind of stack those to make the level. I mean, that's not a... that's an interesting idea. Can I just type a thing? Can I just... I guess I can, right? I forgot I can just type something. I can just type whatever I want in there. It's just got to match case here. What? No, I hadn't considered that. I had not. I mean, I could see where that might potentially have benefits, possibly. But it was not something I was thinking about, to be honest, just because still kind of early on in building the levels. I mean, so that's the thing, right? That was part of the reason why I wanted to build a level, a real level. Damn it, what's the problem now? Was because I wanted to think about, like, actually make use of this and see what the problems are with what I've built here, rather than just continuing to do more and more additions to what the engine supports without having actual use cases other than what I anticipate we might need. Okay, so the destination meta tile is trying to find a matching palette, and what did we run out of palettes? Print F. Hi, do you want to maybe help me out with what you're doing here? Okay, I don't know why that stopped debugging, but that's fine. Uses 10 tile tall vertical stripes. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I had not considered that. Why do I not see... Oh, I do. Alright. So, last color analyzed and was not found was 12 in hex. So the meta tile, which meta tile is this? 37s. It looks like it is probably the top of this. Why is the color not being found? Zelda 1 is more regimented on how it lays out its screens, does not do continuous scrolling. Well, I mean, yeah, but it's just a different kind of game. But to your question, I think, you know, there's validity at looking at all of those kinds of optimizations. But again, I don't think they were. I think they were planning things out and then said, "Oh no, we can't fit the game if we just put raw tiles. So what do we do to make this work?" And they came up with this, you know, this scheme for how to make that work. All right, so let's see. Okay, yeah, so I'm remembering this a little bit better now. So we have those four. That's four. 1, 2, 3. There's 3 palettes. There's 3 palettes, and we have the player palette. We have the little bit palette. We have the FX palette, but that's for the sprites. That's not for the background. The background, we try to figure out which palette it is, and then, or sorry, we compose meta tiles and then try to kind of dedupe and do all this other stuff. So how... It's because it can't find a palette that's using the same color set. But it's just using the blue and the blue and the sand color. that like off yellow, off white color. So why can't it use the same palette as this? The other part that I'm not exactly recalling off the top of my head was, I think I had set it up so that the palettes were, the reason it was doing it this way was because I was essentially just being a little bit more regimented and saying like, okay, this is all the same palette, just for the sake of making it easier for the tool to determine where the palettes go. But I don't remember. I'm gonna probably have to look back and see. But also, we can try this and see if this matters in any way when we go to do the export. My guess is probably not. How come nobody documented this dumb thing? Oh, wait. So why... How is it possible that we're using up all our palettes when most of what we have on the map is water? What is this? Yeah. I mean, I've seen similar write-ups to this, maybe not to the extent that this was done. But, you know, we're not there yet. I know I talked about this at some point, so I'll definitely come back to this, I'm sure, but not there yet. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. The blue should be the background color. In fact, yeah, so the blue should be the background color, and then like all of these tiles should be using that same palette, except for these. So this is 2 colors, this is 3 colors, this is 2, 3, that's 3 colors. So like these guys, that could be 1 palette actually. Because there's enough room for all of them to be in that same palette. But like I said, I don't remember. I remember adding this. I remember that it was important for the background palettes to work, but I don't remember why. So we'll have to look back at that, because the mediocre engineer who wrote this forgot to explain how it worked, and the last time I looked at it was almost a year ago, more. So, yeah. Blue, light blue sand, and green as a single palette. Yeah, so thanks. No, I know. I'm just being self-deprecating in hopes that it's entertaining. Yeah, so the blue is the background, the light blue and the sand and the green are the 3 colors, and then they can all share that palette together. That's the idea anyway. I think, if I remember right, the whole point of that palette layer is like it's a hint to the tool that like, hey, these are the same. I mean, generally, if it's hitting the assert, something has gone wrong. So I don't want it to continue on. It's better that it really crashes and burns so it's obvious versus exporting partial data or bad data. That's kind of the idea. This isn't some... So, like, if this were some tool that I was selling, I would never do this way because, you know, that's very bad usability. If this were a game and we ran into a situation like that, you know, probably you'd do your best to try and keep running, even if it meant like a texture was missing or a model was missing or something like that. Because different industry, different failure recovery criteria. You know, if this were just a commercial utility that I was writing, it would, you know, pop up a message and explain and have a link to documentation probably and whatever. And here it's just me, so I know what the problem is. Like, I understand that error is telling me that it couldn't find a palette that was suitable for that meta tile. And what it's doing here is it's showing me the meta tile. And so, like, those are the NES colors. What can I bring up that is... I think NES Screen Tool has a reasonably good palette viewer, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so it doesn't say... There was some tool, was it even... I don't know. There was some tool, or no, that's what I was looking at. The NESDev wiki has a nice little view of the palette with the numbers on it. Palette. No, I haven't. I don't know. I'm not sure what the issue is right now. So what I'm just kind of explaining like what I'm seeing here, since it was raised, like why am I asserting and stuff like that. So I understand what the problem is. Like, so here are all the colors, right? All the 12s, which are this blue color here, and then we have 37, which is the, looks like it's that sand color. So visually I can see the difference in the numbers, and kind of in my brain, just because I've done this for so long, it mapped over to, I knew it was, you know, this tile. I was like 95% sure that was the tile that was the problem. My guess is it's possible it's the wrong color blue, and that's also what's throwing it off. It's like a weird... Oh, it's drawing. Am I drawing in the tile? No. Because like these tiles should all be using the same blue here. So like if I do this and then I try to export this again, let's see if it changed the value there or not. I don't remember if blue is actually, if that color blue 12 hex is correct. It looks like it's okay. Well, yes, but insofar as that there's this palette layer. I added the ability for it to draw the attribute grid, so that I know like how contained it has to be in terms of the color palettes that are available. That's the plan. Brandon, that those are gonna actually fire projectiles, and hey, thanks for joining. So yeah, so it's just like I looked for color 12. I don't know where it is. I couldn't find it in any of the palettes, which raises the question, what colors are in those palettes? So let's go back and take a look here at the palettes. So map palette. Okay, map palette has 1, 2. All right, so I think I see the first problem. So 0F is gotta be like black, right? Yeah. So the problem is that we are running out of colors to do. Pretty sure that's the problem. We're running out of colors to do that palette. And there was a way to set the background color in the map. Default background color is 0E. So then, let's see. Is this the properties of just the map? It is. And I don't have, so let's add this here, background. And it is 12 hex, which is what, 18 in decimal. So now we've told it, okay, you don't want to use 0F as your background color. What you actually want to use is 18 decimal. So let's see if that made any difference. It did not. Okay. Where's it getting 0F from? Oh, wait a minute. Is it in the actual project file here? No. No, I was pretty sure it was in... pretty sure it was in here. So let's see. So the default background, it's going to get a value here if it's set. I'm pretty sure. Oh, is it capital B background? And I used the lower. That's okay. I did that. So default background color is. Really, why did it get? Oh, is that the layer property and not the map property? That could be it. Hold on a second. That's the tile layer. Is there a, there's let's see, map properties. Yes. So what did I say it was? It's 12, so that's 18. Okay, I forgot. I forgot that we have this even. And then, oh, right. Okay, I remember now. Okay. So, yeah, let's talk about that. Because I totally forgot about this, but now that I'm looking at it, everything has come rushing back. Pity you can't explicitly state which NES palette. Well, yes, that's what this is doing. So I'll talk to that in a second. Then your color direction code can narrow down. Are you, well, not clamping but banning those illegal colors? Yeah. So no, you're spot on here. Just give me, excuse me, a second to find where the heck that file is. Because I don't remember what folder it's in, but this is, you're 100% correct with what you were asking. You might be cheating. You might have remembered it, and you were just kind of leading me on to see if I would remember or not. no, I don't think that's what you were doing. I'm just joking. Okay, so what we said was, when we were working on this over a year ago, backgrounds should just have a palette defined to start out with. And the reason was because it helps ensure that you have, like, on the one hand, it would be nice if the tool could figure out, okay, here are all the palettes that you want to use. But at the same time, the artist is going out of their way to use colors that are specific to the palette, to certain palettes. And rather than the tool having to guess what those colors are, we can just put together a palette that can then be used to sort of do the reverse lookup of the RGB value. So the RGB value is mapped to an NES value using that algorithm that we found using the distance formula, where RGB colors are compared using the sort of standard 2D space distance, and that will, or is it 3D space distance? 3D space distance? Because it's RGB? Yeah. And then the colors that come closest to one another are mapped to the NES palette equivalent. And then after that's done, then we look at the palettes that are here, and it, and then it tries to make sure that the palette is correctly used. And if it doesn't, then it will create a problem. It'll throw out that error. So what you can see is that we're using 0F here for our palette, and that's not going to work because we have this background color that we are using that is the blue, although it's showing that it's more of like almost like a purple. Is that the Super Mario Brothers sky color that people have been arguing is purple or blue for the last 2 decades or more, maybe, since emulators have really been popular. Anyway, so we've got that, and then the sand color that's why it prints out the colors when it's looking it up, because then I can say, okay, so I need 12 and I need 37 as part of the palette. And I was definitely using Screen Tool to build this just because it was simple to do so, because it supports the palette in the format that I want already. So that's 37, and then that's the wavelet, and then there is that green color. And the green color, I honestly don't remember which one it is. I think it's this one. I think it's 2A. So we will change this to 2A. And then we will save our palette. And we will rerun this process and see if it is happier. Except that is not palette 1. That is, I made it palette 2, right? Because if we look at this, that's palette 1, palette 2, palette 3, palette 4. So let's go back and just double check that. Yeah, okay. So palette 1 is just the water. It's kind of a waste in some sense to just do that. But that's what it is. I mean, I guess then we could just have one palette. Let's just do that. Let's just see if that works. If I'm remembering this correctly and doing this with any sort of reasonable logic here, then it should be okay, because it's got enough color space to represent this, I think. Okay, so let's see what it does now. Okay, well, so I was wrong, but that's okay. PAL, NTSC, play choice, all slightly different. Yeah, I mean, NTSC, there's that joke that NTSC stands for never the same color. I thought that was pretty entertaining. But yeah, all of them are slightly different based on the fact that, the definitions were pretty vague and analog. So although there's the guys over at Something Nerdy have done a lot of work, a lot of manual work, and I'm definitely going to be misstating this a little bit because I don't remember the exact details. But they have done, I believe, the manual work of running colors through a large number of consumer grade and PVM CRTs with spectrum photometers. I think that's what that's called. A device that measures color and light in order to come up with like a definitive answer of like what the color is on a particular television. And there was some, I shouldn't say, because there was some really interesting sort of conclusion that he had arrived at based on the analyzed video signals related to essentially how there is sort of a definitive answer about what colors are what colors. And it's not, the sky is not actually purple. But anyway, I'm sure I'm getting that partially wrong. And he'd get all fired up if he knew. So suffice it to say, they did some research that kind of contradicts the popular notion that the colors, the true expected colors are unknown. I think that's probably a good summary. And then beyond that, I don't know the details, so I shouldn't really speculate of like what that actually means. So going back to my code that is broken, it was complaining that it could not find a matching palette for this stuff. And last color analyzed and not found was 0C. So 0C is, I think this is probably the strip of road that is at the top. Because 0C is some sort of, oh no, oops, I did not mean to do that. It is some sort of dark blue color. What dark blue is in here? And gotta look back at the output of that text. It's blue, and then there's like, oh, maybe it's not blue. Maybe it's, or it's not meant to be blue. It could be that it is this. That's probably what it is. It's probably that green. So it thinks it's 0C. I had put 2A. Obviously, I was wrong. Oh yeah, there's 0C. So okay, let's choose 0C. I don't like that color, but we will use that for now, and then we can always change it. All right, so let's see if that exports now. Oh, is this still running? It's still running. Or no, it worked? Oh, it worked. Okay. Huzzah. You may want, is an analog process. Different TV manufacturers, quality of cables, and even the chips on the boards will all play their part. Yeah, right. Because it's analog, and because there was no spec that said. So there was nothing, as far as I'm aware, that said like, the equivalent color of 11 on the NES is this in RGB 24-bit color. 11 was just a signal that got generated by the NES PPU, that was that color, right? And it was done through an analog process, and there was no, again, as far as I understand it, there was no thought given to how does that translate over to a higher resolution display with better color representation capability. And that is where part of the argument comes from about, you know, what the color ought to be versus what it is versus the various representations we've seen from different emulators over time. To the point where some of it was obviously like the emulator developer just going based off of probably what they remember as, you know, as someone who was playing the game at some point. Cannot open include file for these thingies. Why are they not there? Hi. Why are you not opening that folder? Why are you just closing it when I click? Hello? There it is. Okay, where did those palette files end up? Oh, they're here. Well, that's no good, but okay. 9 through 19, that sounds bad. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but let's bring these over so it stops complaining. We will also simultaneously at some point like figure out what it needs those for. This may not work at all. What are you talking about? Oh. What? Metatile 19. Oh, it's right. Did I put it? I copied it into the wrong folder? Yeah, I copied it in the wrong folder. Sorry. Yes. I remember having an old wooden frame CRT TV with an RF cable for my NES and the dials for adjusting colors. Not everyone calibrated with the test cards that were broadcast to. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we had, you know, I had a TV like that too, and you literally, it was like you just looked at the TV and you adjusted it so that it looked as close to the right thing as possible. And usually you'd be like looking at a person and trying to adjust the colors and the contrast and stuff to make it so that their skin tone looked normal, so that they didn't like have a green tint or they were all red or something like that, right? You didn't want them to be like all flush looking. All right, so that was good. Did I hit an enemy and die? I wasn't really paying attention. I saw the enemy spawn, but I did not see if there was an enemy that spawned and killed me. Okay, so the map loaded. That's good. That actually looked good. When you were creating 4 colors for sprite, make 2 sprites, giving a total of 8 colors on the program. Wait, when you're creating more than 4 colors for a sprite, you make 2 sprites, giving a total of 8 colors. Well, it's really 6 colors, but yes, and program them to both into, yes, that's correct. Yeah, that color obviously is no good. We'll fix that in a second, Miralupa. Yes, so to your question, Lunatrek, yes, you basically, the hardware sprites should really be considered sort of independent from the sprites you want to represent in your game. Yeah, you always need the same background. So the idea is that like you may have a bunch of sprites that make up one object, one what you would normally call a sprite on another system that supports, larger sprites, like, the Game Boy Advance supports 60, maybe even 128 by 128 sprites, but like much, it supports a much more wider variety of sprite sizes than the NES. For this, if you wanted to have, something that's 24 by 24, you'd have 3 sprites across and 3 down. And yes, you could make each of them use a different palette. Excuse me, and then you'd have what you're talking about, where you could use more colors. I mean, that's where someone like Frankengraphics is really good. She's really good at being, because she understands the limitations of the hardware very well. She's really good at understanding how to leverage that in order to make it look literally as good as it can. So let's do this just as kind of an interesting little example. So like right now the water is kind of bluish purple. Now it's like way more purple. Still kind of purple. Now everything is really blue. Like if we reset the game here. Oh, I can't. If we reset the game here, like everything is super blue. And these are not changing anything about the the game, but it's just changing how the palette translates to RGB, right? Stick with this for now. All right. You're using more tiles though. Well, yeah. You're using more tiles, more sprites. Yeah, Frankengraphics. So, oh yeah, if you don't know who Frankengraphics is, she is awesome. She is. I can't. I can't spell it. Graphics. Graphics. Come on, Google. Yeah, it's just FrankenGFX. I am happy to take a moment to highlight her work because it is crazy good. Yeah, look at this. This is real NES work. This is some of the best NES art I've ever seen. And she, from what I understand, she was not doing graphic work before getting into the NES. Like, she started doing art like this on the NES because she wanted to do it for the NES. And yeah, she's just incredible. I hands down, the best artwork I've seen on the NES. So she worked on Project Blue, which is a really good game. She's got an independent project she's working on called Project Borscht, and then she's also working on a game called Halcyon, which Nathan Tolbert is doing. He recently did the Kickstarter for Anguna, which I've talked about here a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I look at this stuff and I'm just like, ugh, I am not this good, and I don't think I ever will be. Yeah, so I don't know the exact full backstory, but my understanding is that she got into making pixel art to make pixel art for the NES, and then just started doing it and is just fantastic. So yeah, she just has this amazing knack for being able to build art that looks great within the limitations of the system, but is also like actually usable on the system. So definitely follow her if you're interested in NES art, because she's been busy with working on another project, so she hasn't been posting a ton lately. But she is on the Discord for Video Game Sage, and she does post stuff there. She chats pretty frequently, but yeah, I mean, she just everything she posts, it's just, you just go like, this is the kind of stuff that artists who had been working on the NES from the beginning of when it was released, this is the kind of stuff that they put out after many years of working on it. And yeah, she does this every time. So yes, I'm gushing, but it's just because, man, her work is so good. So anyway, so it looks like the enemy that we put in here is potentially spawning and killing the player, except that we don't see it. It is invisible, which is weird and incorrect. So it is set to be visible. It is, let's see, does it have a type? There's the object layer. The object is selected. How come I don't see a type? I see a type there. I see, okay. So the type is a little bit, and let's see what the export tool is doing here. Is it setting it not to be visible for some reason? If it's not visible, then just write that. Otherwise, write the actual export ID. Let's take a look here and see what it's doing when it exports. I mean, that's actually kind of, you know, I know I was gushing about her work, but, you know, you look at the community as a whole for NES homebrews, and one thing I have to say is that even the simpler projects that maybe, you know, the art isn't as good as her art, and the complexity is maybe not as complex as a game like Lizard and stuff like that, even those games are good. Like, that's kind of like, people have this love of the system and they really want to put out something that's good. I mean, not every game, but like the games that people are talking about, you know, regardless of their complexity, are like actually good, well constructed games by people who care about the system. You know, and it's nice to see someone like Frankengraphics put out amazing art, but at the same time, you know, I know on the NES Homebrew podcast, they've talked about a little bit that people might get intimidated by how good her work is. Or you've got someone like Matt Houston, who sometimes is in the chat here. You know, he is working on his second game for the NES, which is a port of another game he wrote, and he does really good work too, and he does it really fast. And, you know, and then there are other people who kind of, you know, they check along and they struggle with it because they're not programmers, and they are just trying to put together a labor of love. And, you know, it's easy to get discouraged by that sometimes, because you look at something and you go, wow, I'll never be able to make something as good as that. But that's really not important. You just do what you got to do. You make what you want to make, and you do the best you can, and people will recognize that. So yeah. All right. Let's take a look if this thing is visible. So this one is not visible, but the question is, what is it actually? Map object J. It is a spawn point, so that is not visible. That is also a spawn point, not visible. Another one. So this is the thing itself, it is visible. And so we've got an export ID. Does it have... Oh, does it have a sprite ID? I wonder if that's the problem. Because spawn sprite ID. I wonder if I need to set the spawn sprite ID, because the problem would be then it wouldn't know what sprite to use to draw. So let's see here. Let's hard code this in just to see if that fixes the problem. So it was 8. So let's continue there. Okay. Itchy. All right. I've got my folder here. And let's build this. Okay, and then reload the ROM. So hopefully now that enemy will show up here. Nope. Okay, that's weird. So I know it's there though, because the ship will collide with it. And if we pause the game, oops. I missed it. Of course, now I'm going to have a hard time colliding with it, right? I guess I could cheat and look at the map. So it's kind of somewhere in between those two little wavelets there when the ground is coming up. Is that it? Is it what's happening, or is it something else? It's in line with this. It should be like right there. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what's interesting is, oh, okay, this is the spot. So it's, is that the spot? What am I looking at here? That's the bottom. So it's like right, basically in the middle over here-ish to the, there it is. So it seems like it's actually flying out and hitting me, but it's weird that it's not. How am I reversing? So the emulator has, if you use backspace, it runs emulation backwards, which is extremely handy. It's one of those things where I think about people who are writing these games. you know, back when the NES was contemporary and they didn't have these tools. And I am extraordinarily grateful to have them. That's not a bad idea. MDTAUK to look and see if the sprite, if something shows up in the sprite viewer, but I don't know that that's really going to be. Let me slow down the emulation too. It's almost like they're... I'm still pretty convinced that it is just not spawning the sprite properly. Oh, if that was a game... Yeah, that would have been pretty cool. I don't know how you would do that on the NES, because it is pretty memory intensive to store frame by frame, like what's going on in the game. It's not hard to write the code, but like when you're so limited in RAM, I feel like you'd probably run out pretty quickly unless you had a very, very clear set of limitations on it, and also a clear set of a clear set of limitations. So like there's only so many enemies that can ever be on the screen, and you only have a certain amount of RAM that you can set aside for it and stuff like that. It seems highly difficult unless you had a mirrored operation for everything. Well, I mean, ultimately, yeah, no, that's true. There's, like, thinking about it from the perspective of, in a simple world space, it's probably easier to do. Like, if you're dealing with a single screen at a time, that probably cuts down the complexity pretty highly, and then the rest of it is just like you're just taking a snapshot every frame, effectively, of the game state, and then you're just playing that in reverse. And so it's just a game of how much memory do I have to represent, how much memory do I need to represent game state, and then how long is that actually? Because it's not really very fun if you can only rewind like 1 second, because 60 frames is all you can hold. So yeah, so 45C is probably, here's 45C. So let's look at the order in which things are written, because I don't remember. So it's going to write the export ID. Where does it write the Y? So that's Y. This is X, which is 88 in hex. Here's the entity ID. Okay, and then CC is the export ID. CC. And then, wait, is that right? So Y is 045C. So that gets written out 5C04. So X is 88 hex, which is, that's 136, is that right? Yeah, so that is the X value there. And then, like I said, that's the, so that's the X, that's the entity ID, and then that's the export ID. And before that, it is going to write out, that's it. So that's the end of that object. So CC0688 5045C, and then that it's visible. Sprite ID, it did write out 8 like I asked it to. It's about entity ID. So okay, so something is potentially wrong in here then. Sprite type, the position, let's see where that call is. Probably wouldn't be a fun mechanic with any, yeah, that's like, I think it could be done, but I think you'd have to be like really, you'd have to come up with something really clever about the way you're using it so that even in the limited fashion you're using it, it doesn't matter. Like, if you look at a game like Braid, not to use Jonathan Blow as my only example, but it's a good example of that mechanic being something that's actually fun to do. He's storing off a lot of information about a lot of things. If you simplified it down to, like, it's only a single screen, there are only a few things that are tracking. You're not tracking camera motion. You're not adding tile, maybe you're not doing too much with tiles. You know, you're just kind of keeping things simple. You could probably come up with something good, but it's definitely challenging, I'm sure. So let's see. So level object data. This is the enemy sprite. This is the enemy type. So T4 is the entity type, and this is the sprite type. So CC is not a valid sprite type. Where is it getting that from? And I'm pretty sure that that's what it is loading in, because that's the first byte in the file. Whereas with like these other things, it looks like it is getting a more appropriate, so like it shouldn't be CC, it should be oh wait, that should be 8. So I gotta see why it's doing that. So let's update the file, let's rebuild and just check that that actually fixes the problem, and then we can take a step back and look at what's going on and why that's happening. Oh, the emulation is slowed down. Okay. So let's see if we see the thing pop up now. Yep, there it is. Okay. So that was the problem. It's not getting the right sprite type. Why is it not getting the right sprite type? I don't know. That value is this entity ID that is being written out. No, it is the export ID that's being written out. So if we take a look at the export ID being written out for this thing, we're going to see that for some reason it's CC, which means that it's probably that it never got initialized, because that's usually like a junk value. When you're running under the debugger. Why, what? Map objects. There's map objects. Okay. Well, whatever. You've got it here. So, J, this is the thing. Okay. Not sure what you have planned mechanic-wise, but dodging might make movement more interesting. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple things. One was I wanted to make, like, dodging in the sense of dodging barriers, but also, you know, like the typical thing where these enemies are going to... Some enemies are going to actually fire projectiles that you have to get out of the way of. Obviously. I'm not sure if that's what you meant, or you meant like dodging in the sense of, I think I mentioned in a couple streams ago, but if not, I can't remember if that was the one I recorded or not, but there's apparently like some games where you get points for being really close to a projectile, but not or an enemy, but not actually colliding with it. Maybe that's what you're referring to. So why map meta tiles? So GID is 0, which is totally wrong. And it's got background meta tiles. Why is it using that? If it's not visible, then do that. Otherwise, do a lookup in the map meta tiles for the GID. Yeah, so it's getting out of bounds, which is a problem. That's why we're getting CC, which is totally wrong. Projectiles or enemies can sometimes trap players, so a dodge can expand movement. Yeah. Oh, I see. So like an actual dodge capability in the ship. Interesting. Huh. I had not considered that. So these are... Why would it be looking sprites up in the map meta tiles? Yeah, like that was kind of like in my... I was thinking about it for a moment, and you know, you could do like a double tap left or right and do some sort of dodge movement if we went that direction. Yep. So these are all background tiles. What is... Why is this... Is this just wrong code now? What I'm kind of curious about is also... It's got 19 different meta tiles. Seems like a lot, but I don't know. We'd have to look at them to know if that's actually a lot or not. Maybe it's right. I don't know. So why is it doing this to get... That's weird. I'm not sure. Oh, and then it's also looking at it here to see if it's an object. Is it getting added to the map meta tiles at some point that I'm not remembering? Because these are all populated with background stuff, and then you have these things which are basically empty. But I had basically implemented this in a change to the way things were working for the spawn points to work properly. So, in other words, we were never using this code. So, it's possible... Oh, excuse me. It's possible that this is just all wrong and broken. So it's looping through map object count. It is going through map objects and looking to see... I mean, but none of those... Oh, I see what it, I guess it's trying to do. That's weird, though. Does the GID... This is the GID -1 because the tile set index starts at 1, not 0. Okay. But... yeah, I assume that this has been broken since I made the change. Although, but again, map objects GID is 0. So this value is CC. So it says, okay, yeah, sure, it's an object. Which, I mean, it is. But it's wrong. Because if you look at the map meta tiles, you know, none of these things in here are objects. They're all just background tiles. If not a dodge, then perhaps a moment of shielding invincibility for a few frames. Yeah, kind of like how they do in Star Fox, right? Like where you do the roll and it deflects lasers. Maybe an old barrier collision. I don't think so. I have to look back at where this is actually being set, because where are the references to this? Because it is confusing that this is doing this. Something is wrong with the logic, and the logic is just happening to work because it was doing it for objects that weren't getting spawned by the assembly code because they were spawn points or non-visible entities, so it was okay. But now that we're trying to spawn something that isn't invisible, it is not okay. Yeah, so you'd have, yeah, it would be like an animation of the ship doing sort of like a rolling over maneuver, like a barrel roll. Although I think that's technically not true. I think that's considered an aileron roll, not a barrel roll, from some video I watched a while ago. I think that's the right word, aileron, which is the part of the plane that allows it to do that roll. Alright, so where on earth is this getting set? Looks like this is the only place it's getting set. Map object has GID. Then get the value. Are we actually ever getting a GID? No to that. No to that. No to that. No to that. So none of them are actually getting a GID. Where? Why? Why? How? I have questions. I have questions about this. How is it that I implemented something that was looking for a GID that's not there? There's ID, but not GID. Get the objects. iterate through all their positions. If they have a GID, get the GID. Oh, was it something because... I wonder if something changed in... No. The only thing I can think of is that it was because of some sort of switch over from the tile set being included. And I'm not even 100% sure about that. I'll have to go back and look to see if we see any examples of it doing that, but I don't know. The only references to GIDs I see are the tile sets. That's what makes me think that it was because we were at one point, I know, including the tile sets for these things in the map, and then we moved away from doing that. And that's potentially why that's totally broken now. So what is it trying to do? What it seems, let's see, it's trying to look up the thing. Oh, right. Okay. So it was looking at the tile set GID because it was trying to determine if it was a background tile set or if it was a sprite tile set, and like an object tile set. And it was using the GID to do that determination. But the thing is that because sprites, or yeah, because they're all objects, then that's really funny. So because they're all objects, then this is kind of useless because like the map meta tiles are never going to contain the sprites. So like that's pointless. This is going to look up to see like if the thing is visible or not. And then this is wrong because it should be the map meta tile no longer has the export ID for it because it is not going to contain the tile set anymore. So do we have the value that we need in the map object itself of what the sprite identifier is to export? And I don't know the answer to that question. We're going to find out. The GID is totally wrong because that's 0 and it's essentially meaningless now. We have a type, so we could do a thing where if it's visible, it has to look up the sprite ID for the type. Because I mean, they're not necessarily, well, they're not the same though. The entity and the sprite are separate things. So I think what we probably need to do can we get the sprite ID from the string too? Get sprite. Somewhere we're loading up this thing with external sprites, right? That is, I think that's just coming from the file. the project file. No, that doesn't seem to have it. So let's go back to the project file and take a look. Those are the sprites that get loaded in. That gets that array. And then it's just going to look and see, and then it's going to add. Let's see, there's the project files. I think it just compares it. Then it increments the sprite ID and sets it up. Oh, yeah, it should be in external sprites. So it's got a name for it. All right, so we should be able to add something where in the map we just say, here's the type. And then we can add, let's add a real actual type here. Because I like having the object types here, and we'll just call this, you know, like object. Like this is our vanilla object that we want to, you know, use when we're not using one of these other ones, and it's going to have a sprite type, except that that should have been a string. Sprite type. And it does not have a default value, and so we will oh, but the problem is then then I can't use the entity type here. All right, that's fine. Let's I like keeping it consistent that we're using types anyway, so I don't mind doing that. Right. Do we have to come back to this or something for it to load that? There it is. So yeah, entity type is little bit, and then what is the sprite? The sprite is the same thing but lowercase because consistency be damned. Okay, so now when we go back to the map file, we should see it's got any type and sprite type, which is what we want it to have, and we got to just change the code that we were using before, where it's just looking at the raw type. There was something where it was looking up the entity type here. So it's got the nullable type. All right. Yeah. So we'll add some code here to make this work. Why won't you find what I already defined? Okay. So in this case, the map object is going to be visible. Right? And we want to iterate through the properties similar to what we're doing here. So I'm just going to steal this code. But we're looking for the sprite type and the entity type, and we're going to set that, and then that should fix the problems that we're having, hopefully. So yeah, I guess we should just steal that too, instead of me typing it out. So if we get that, get that. So those are our two parts here, and then come on. So I think this is just using I can't remember if this is how this is being looked up. I thought I had a method that was looking up and converting that writes out the sprite types. I'm running out of steam here. Once we get this working, I think I'm gonna wrap. So all right. When we write out the objects, I'll get entity ID from string. Okay, so it's using type for that. That's okay. So that was what I was looking for, get entity ID from string. Yeah, so we'll replace the type value that it is reading in with is it just get value, yeah, or get value of value. So it will just read the string value in, except what is this? Is this, oh. What is this size? This is max file folder name, right? Yep. All right, so that's going to copy that into the type. For sprite type, though, we don't have anything, or there's nothing defined currently. Maybe what I'll do is I'll reuse spawn sprite. If it's visible, because if it's not visible, then we just write a dummy value. If it's visible, we were doing this here, but it no longer, that doesn't work. So we'll say just use that. It'll be doubled because we also write it later on for if it were a spawn point, but that's okay. The real question becomes, this is an integer, and where is this actually used? This is looking it up when it goes through the external sprites based on the string name of the thing. So Yeah, that's what I wanted. So in this case, we're copying over the spawn sprite, the name, and that'll get converted to the right ID later. And then we can take a look at the file that gets generated here and see if that worked. Hopefully it did. So the export was good. Let's copy over the exported data. And let's reload the file. Okay, it's not letting me just do that, but all right. So 045C, 88, and then 6. 6. So the X, and then before that it's the entity ID. Okay, so that's seems okay. And before that, it should be the spawn sprite ID, but it's 0 is not right. So let's see why. Oh, you know what it might be? I wonder if it's because we're not processing that for this because it's visible. Yeah, so if it's visible or spawn sprite ID. Oh, that's weird. Oh, if it's visible or if it's empty. Like if there's nothing in the name of spawn sprite. I am tentatively going to change this logic. I mean, this seems like the right thing to do, and just say, like, okay, I don't care if it's visible or not. Just as long as there's a spawn sprite, do this conversion. Because if it's not visible, we have to do it because it's something that... Oh, no, that's not true. Oh, but then it would be empty. If it's not visible, then it could be also the camera speed changes or the palette changes, not just the spawn point. But then that spawn sprite string would be empty. So this should be okay. All right, so that export. Yeah, that exported. Okay. Hello? Replace. And then let's build the game. And let's just take a look here before we bother with loading the ROM. Yeah, that's better. So that should be 8, that should be 6, that's the X, that's the Y. This looks good. So let's go back into the emulator, which is gone. Okay. I guess I closed it. Come on, there it is. Oops. I didn't mean to full screen it, but that's fine. Alright, so there are the spawn points. There's the one that was getting me. Okay, good. So we got that working. So we got to fix the grass color. Now, one of the things that I'm not crazy about is the fact that, like, I can fix it in post. The color that is used for the grass, I can just literally change it like this. And then I can go on the one hand, it's good. On the other hand, it's not. So it's good because I can just do this update, rebuild the game, and it'll work. But it's not good because then when we need to reprocess the map, it will break because the palette is invalid, which is not the best. So part of that is down to changing the actual PNG file so that the color matches the way I want it to. Oh, why did you not? That's disappointing. Did I? Yeah. Okay. That was the problem I said we were going to have. Does it not include that in the game? I guess it doesn't. Okay, never mind. So that's not going to actually work the way I wanted it to. I mean, obviously the easiest thing to do to see the way I want it to look is to do that, and then fast forward the emulation so we can get past this. Never gets quite fast enough because once you open the debugging tools, it slows down the emulator a little bit. But so we got to go back and, oh, come on now. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. How is that not the color? Is the palette being rewritten? That's the color I wanted it to be. So yeah, so that looks right. So we need to figure out how to make that work. And like I said, I mean, it comes down to not this, like Tile doesn't care, but in the actual JPEG that's being used to construct this, that color, this color here, is translating to that blue-green color because that's the sort of closest one that it is, and we gotta change that. And I can do that in sprite, but I'm not gonna do it right now because it is late, and I've been streaming for about 2.5 hours. So, any questions or comments or thoughts before we wrap up here? Oh, I should go back to the other view so that people watching later can actually see the comments pop up on the video. No? Okay. Well, as always, thank you for watching. If you'd like to find me online to ask me questions, you can certainly do that. I'm on Twitter at Clervis. I am on Discord as Clervis also. I'm in Video Game Sage as Zelius. There is a whole group of people who are brilliant and experienced at programming on the NES there at Video Game Sage, and also at NESDev as well on the NESDev Discord and their forums, although they are going through a process of changing the nesdev.com to nesdev.org. Miralupa and MDTA UK. Take care. Thanks for joining the stream. And yeah, so feel free to reach out to me also via email, zelius@gmail.com, Xelius. I'm happy to talk to anybody who has questions or needs help. If you are so inclined, there is a Patreon and a Buy Me a Coffee, obviously completely optional. Do appreciate the people who are doing that, but not in the least required. If you'd like to pre-order the game and get access to some of the source code, you are free to do so. That will get you access to the game as a ROM once it is complete. The link will be in the video description below in YouTube. Other than that, have a great evening. And yeah, Lunatrek, definitely message me. I'm happy to talk and get that all sorted out. So yeah, have a great evening. Thanks for joining, and I will see you next week.